Good evening, and welcome to Footnotes and Folly. Tonight we begin something ambitious, the complete literature of ancient Egypt, the whole written soul of the oldest civilization on Earth, read and rendered into plain English across this series, with nothing left out. Our guide is the great Sir Ernest Wallis Budge of the British Museum, whose anthology gathers up everything the Egyptians wrote, from the holiest spell to the silliest love song. This is part 1 of that journey. Part 1 takes us to the very beginning. First to Thoth, the god who, the Egyptians believed, invented writing itself, and to the sacred stationery of the scribe who served him. Then to the pyramid texts, the oldest religious writings anywhere in the world, carved inside royal tombs to carry a dead king up among the stars. And finally to the stories of the magicians, the wonder tales of sorcerers who folded back lakes and set severed heads talking. Gods, tombs, and magic. Let us begin. We begin Budge's book with the figure who, for the Egyptians, stood behind writing itself, Tehuti, whom Greek tradition calls Thoth. This is not merely a chapter about pens and paper, though we shall get to those, and I promise the ancient stationery cupboard is better than it sounds. Budge begins with a theology of writing, why letters could be holy, why books could be powerful, and why the person who copied them could stand very near the divine.
Egyptian literature, Budge says, is the product of roughly 4,000 years. It was written in 3 main scripts. First came hieroglyphic, in which the signs were pictures of things. Then came hieratic, in which those picture forms were simplified so that a trained hand could write quickly. Last came demotic, in which many signs had lost their visible likeness to pictures and had become symbols. To the Egyptians, writing itself had been invented by Thoth. Because Thoth was understood as a form of the mind, intellect, and wisdom of the god who created heaven and earth, the picture signs of writing were treated as holy, divine, and sacred. In that sense, the letters of Egypt were not just marks. They were thought made visible. That belief mattered intensely in religion. Certain sacred texts were thought to have special virtue when written in hieroglyphs, and parts of books believed to have been composed by Thoth himself were credited with very great power. If such chapters were written out in hieroglyphs and placed with the dead in their coffins, they were thought to help the soul profoundly. Thoth did not stop at writing. Budge credits him, in Egyptian belief, with inventing the science of numbers, fixing the courses of the sun, moon, and stars, ordering the seasons, and therefore becoming the first astronomer. He was Lord of Wisdom, owner of all knowledge, heavenly and earthly, divine and human, and the author behind mankind's first efforts to draw, paint, and carve. A splendidly full portfolio, I think, and not one I should like to see on a civil service form. As Lord and maker of books, Thoth was also the perfect scribe. He was the clerk of the gods, keeping the registers in which human deeds were written down. Because his knowledge allowed him to discover truth in every case, the Egyptians made him chief judge of the dead. Budge then tells the old heavenly trial. Osiris was accused of crimes by his twin brother Set, whom Budge calls the god of evil. Thoth examined the evidence and proved before the gods that the charges were false, that Osiris had spoken truth, and that Set had lied. So every Egyptian hoped Thoth would do for him what he had done for Osiris. On the day of the great judgment, when the heart was weighed in the balance, Thoth was the divine officer one wanted in the room. Exact, learned, and incorruptibly fair. For that reason, important religious works in every period were believed to have been composed either by Thoth himself or by holy scribes inspired by him. These books were regarded as sources of the deepest wisdom, unmatched anywhere else in the world. Budge thinks Egypt owed much of her international fame for learning to them. Later popular tradition said the books of Thoth numbered 36,525. Native Egyptians and foreigners alike revered them, and the scribes who studied and copied them were honored because the spirit of Thoth, the twice great and thrice great god, was believed to dwell in them. The profession of scribe was therefore highly honorable and well rewarded. No rank, Budge says, and no dignity was too high for an educated scribe. Budge's Thoth appears in papyri and on monuments as an ibis-headed man. His companion is usually a dog-headed ape called a sten. In the hall of the Great Judgment, Thoth stands with a reed in one hand, writing on a pallet the result of the weighing of the dead man's heart. The gods accept his report without question. According to that report, the good soul is rewarded and the bad is punished. From the beginning of Egyptian history to its end, Budge says, Thoth's place remained unchanged, the righteous judge, and the maker of the laws by which heaven and earth, gods and men, were governed. The chapter even pauses for images of Thoth as the scribe of the gods, and of Thoth with Amen. Ra aiding Isis in the papyrus swamps. Having placed writing under Thoth's protection, Budge turns to the practical matter of what Egyptians wrote on. The materials were numerous, but the commonest were stone, wood, skin, and papyrus. The earliest writing was probably traced on such surfaces with a black or red fluid used as ink. Once the Egyptians learned to use metals, they began cutting inscriptions into stone. One very old chapter of the Book of the Dead, chapter 64, was said in its rubric to have been found cut on a block of alabaster of the south in the reign of Menkaure of the 4th dynasty, about 3700 B.C. The stone was laborious and expensive. For longer texts, Egyptians used wood. Budge points to wooden coffins in the British Museum whose insides are covered with religious texts written in ink, almost as if on paper. Sheepskin and goatskin, or parchment as we would say, were also used, but rarely. Very few ancient Egyptian documents on skin survive. The great writing material was papyrus. Budge cannot say when the Egyptians first learned to make it, but the early dynastic inscriptions already include the picture of a papyrus roll, so the practice must be extremely old. Among the oldest dated inscribed papyri he mentions are accounts written in the reign of King Asa of the 4th dynasty about 3400 BC found at Saqqara, roughly 20 miles south of Cairo. The plant itself grew in the swamps and marshes of Lower Egypt and in the shallow pools left by the annual Nile flood. By Budge's day it no longer grew in Egypt proper, though it survived in the Egyptian Sudan, sometimes reaching 25 feet. Its roots and stems served as fuel. The stem could be thicker than a man's arm, and in some districts the large rounded head was boiled and eaten as a vegetable. The Egyptian variety, Budge says, was smaller than the Sudanese one. Papyrus paper was made from the inner stem. The maker cut it into thin strips, their width depending on the thickness of the stem and their length on the stem's length. Several strips were laid side by side lengthwise, and another layer was laid across them crosswise, making a sheet of 2 layers. These layers were joined with glue and water or with gum. Pliny says muddy Nile water itself had glue-like qualities and was used for fastening the strips, though Budge notes that traces of gum have actually been found on papyri. The sheet was then pressed, dried in the sun, and rubbed smooth with a hard polisher. Budge adds a footnote from Mesopotamia. Some modern scribes there polished rough Russian paper on a board with a glass bottle before writing on it, which is a pleasingly practical survival of the same instinct. Sheets could be joined into rolls of almost any length. The longest roll in the British Museum was the Harris Papyrus No. 133 feet long and 16.5 inches high. The second was a Book of the Dead, 123 feet long and 18.5 inches high, with 2,666 lines, arranged in 172 columns. Ordinary literary rolls were much smaller, rarely over 20 feet long and usually only 8 to 10 inches high. Now to the scribe's tools. The scribe mixed his paints on a palette, usually of alabaster, wood, ivory, or slate, about 8 to 16 inches long and 2 to 3.5 inches wide, with square corners. At one end were oval or circular hollows for ink or paint. Down the middle ran a groove for the writing reeds, square at one end and sloping at the other. A glued crosspiece or sliding cover held the reeds in place and protected them. The sides of the groove often carried inscriptions naming the owner, praying to the gods for funerary offerings, or invoking Thoth as inventor of writing. Black ink was made from lamp, black or finely powdered charcoal mixed with water and probably a little gum. Red and yellow came from mineral earths or ochres, blue from powdered lapis, lazuli, green from sulfate of copper, and white from lime, white. Ink could also be kept in small wide-mouthed pots of Egyptian porcelain or alabaster. Colors were rubbed down on a stone slab with a little stone muller. The writing read the pen was 8 to 10 inches long and between 1/16 and 1/8 of an inch thick. In early use, its writing end was bruised rather than cut. In later times, thicker reeds were cut like a quill or steel pen and carried in special boxes of wood and metal. Budge adds that many examples of these materials could be seen in the Egyptian rooms of the British Museum, including wooden pallets of Ramri, an official of Thoth's Roman IV around 1470 B.C. and Omzi, king of Egypt around 1600 B.C. Papyrus was expensive, so students did not waste it. In temple schools, pupils wrote exercises and copied standard literary works on slices of fine white limestone, or on lime-whitened boards shaped like modern school slates. The teachers' master copies were written on larger limestone slabs. Similar slabs carried the copies of texts that masons would later cut into temple and monument walls. When figures of kings or gods were to be carved, their proportions were first marked out with vertical and horizontal lines drawn to scale. Broken pieces of pottery were also used for writing practice. In the Ptolemaic and Roman periods, potsherds carried lists of goods, business letters, and tax receipts. Later still, when parchment was as dear as papyrus, the Copts, the Egyptian Christians, used limestone slices and potsherds for drafts of scripture and letters, much as their ancestors had done.
Finally, Budge tells us how a papyrus roll was kept. When not in use, it was held in shape by a string or papyrus cord tied in a bow. Legal documents might have a clay seal stamped on the cord with the owner's name. Valuable rolls were stored in wooden cases or book boxes and placed in a special chamber known as the House of Books, the library. And there, I think, Budge has quietly brought the whole chapter round. Egyptian literature begins with Thoth, divine mind and divine scribe, and ends with a cord round a roll in a library cupboard. The sacred and the practical are not enemies here. They are the two ends of the same reed pen. Welcome back. In this section, I want to take you into the oldest religious literature Budge can place before us, the pyramid texts. These are not tidy little prayers copied into a pretty book. They are long hieroglyphic inscriptions cut into the inner walls of royal pyramids, painted green and meant to work. Their business was nothing less than to raise a dead king, feed him, protect him, open his senses again, carry him into heaven, and make him eternal. As ambitions go, that is not a modest afternoon.
Budge begins by explaining what the name pyramid text means. It is the modern name for the long hieroglyphic inscriptions carved on the walls of the chambers and corridors of 5 pyramids at Saqqara. The oldest of those pyramids belonged to Yunus, a king of the 5th dynasty. The other 4 belonged to Teta, Pepi I Mernera, and Pepi Roman II, kings of the 6th dynasty. Budge reports that Dr. Budge dated these pyramids between 3003 and 3150 B.C., while more recent theories in Budge's day place them about 700 years later. Even on the later dating, Budge presents them as the oldest religious literature known to us. The texts themselves, Budge says, preserve beliefs, dogmas, and ideas older than the 6th dynasty copies in which we meet them. Some sections were probably composed long before writing was used in Egypt. In those very early days, funerary priests would have learned them by heart and recited them whenever a king died. They passed from mouth to mouth, generation after generation, until at last, once writing existed and the danger of forgetting them became real, they were written down. Later still, parts of the pyramid texts were absorbed into the Theban Book of the Dead, appearing on papyri written more than 2,000 years after the pyramids themselves. Budge is careful to warn us that the pyramid texts are not easy. They give precious information about early Egyptian belief and preserve stray historical facts found nowhere else, but many passages will always remain obscure. They describe states of society, climate, and daily life that no modern reader can fully reconstruct. Many words are unknown. Spellings are strange. Sentences are often unlike later Egyptian texts. The ideas themselves can feel profoundly foreign to modern students because they belong to a very early Egyptian African religious world, not to ours. The pyramids at Saqqara containing these inscriptions were discovered by the French archaeologist Mariette in 1880. Paper casts were made of the deeply carved, green, painted inscriptions for Professor Maspero, then director of the Service of Antiquities in Egypt. Maspero printed all 5 texts in hieroglyphic type and translated much of them into French. Budge gives him real credit. Maspero recognized what these old documents were, and his translation showed exceptional insight into many difficult passages. Later discoveries and later scholars clarified some things Maspero could not, but Budge says his work would remain the foundation of pyramid text studies for a long time. The purpose of the pyramid texts was royal and practical. Like Egyptian religious funerary literature in general, they were written for the benefit of the dead king. They were meant to bring about his glorious resurrection, secure his happiness in the other world, and give him everlasting life. The king was to become in the next world what he had been in this one, a king. More than that, he was to reign over the gods, command the powers of heaven, and direct the spirits and souls of the righteous, just as Egypt's kings had ruled living bodies on earth. But there was a theological problem. The Egyptian king was regarded as an incarnation of the great God, and yet he died like any other man. If he could die once, people feared he might die again in the other world. So the priest used every prayer, spell, hymn, and incantation in the pyramid text to preserve the king's life after death. The aim was not merely to make him a living soul in the Tuat, the other world, but to keep him alive there. One method was daily feeding. Each pyramid had a funerary temple attached to it, and there the appointed priest offered food and drink to the dead king. As each offering was presented, the priest recited a formula. That formula was believed to convert ordinary material food into a spiritual substance fit for the Ka, the double or vital power of the king. The offerings renewed his life, and failure to make them was treated as an offense against the dead king's spirit. Another essential method was the ceremony called the opening of the mouth. Its aim was to restore the king's powers of breathing, thinking, speaking, tasting, smelling, and walking. Alongside it came the presentation of food, clothing, scents, unguents, and everything else the king might need in the other world. The Egyptians believed that the spiritual counterparts of these objects passed across and stood ready for the king's use. The king would also need a household and a court. Budge says that in primitive times, when a king died, many male and female slaves were killed and buried in his tomb. Their spirits were expected to serve the king in the other world, just as their bodies had served him on earth. The king also had enemies to fear there: hostile gods and spirits, deadly animals, serpents, and other dangerous creatures. Priests therefore composed protective spells, often in the form of prayers, to guard the tomb, the mummified body, and the royal spirit. Many such spells were already extremely ancient in the pyramid period, so old that even the scribes of that age did not understand them fully. Budge then draws an important distinction. Some parts of the text belong to a very old world in which magic, as he puts it, was stronger than religion in the later sense. Yet the pyramid texts also contain many prayers for the dead, hymns to the gods on the dead king's behalf, and extracts from several kinds of religious books. Their use shows that by the 6th dynasty the Egyptians placed great value on prayer and divine help, not only on magical formulae. Budge connects this development especially with the spread of the religion of Osiris. By the end of the 6th dynasty, he says, the Assyrian faith had spread throughout Egypt and promised all followers, high and low, rich and poor, a life beyond the grave through the suffering, death, and resurrection of Osiris, who embodied the primeval creator god of heaven and earth. The first major specimen Budge gives is the Book of Opening the Mouth. In the earliest dynasties, the opening of the mouth was performed on a statue of the king. Water was sprinkled before it, incense was burned, and the statue was anointed with 7 kinds of unguents. Its eyes were smeared with eye paint. It was washed, dressed, and then served a funerary meal. The central act was the touching of the statue's lips with a specially shaped instrument called the peshkef. This instrument symbolically cut the bandages that covered the dead king's mouth in the tomb, freeing the mouth so that it could open. In later times the rite grew into a much larger liturgy, known as the Book of Opening the Mouth. Budge lists the ritual personnel: the Kurheb priest, the son of the deceased, and the priests and ministers called Samarif, Sem, Smer, Amaz, and Amkent, with assistants called Mesentiu. The rite began with incense. The priest declared 4 times that the king was pure. Then water was sprinkled over the statue, and the priest said that the king's purifications were the purifications of Horus, and that the purifications of Horus were his. The same formula was repeated with the names of Set, Thoth, and Sep. Budge's notes identify Horus here as a form of the sun god, Set as originally benevolent, though later the great god of evil, Thoth as the divine scribe and lord of wisdom, and Keb as the earth god. The priest next said that the king had received his head and that his bones had been brought to him before Keb. 5 ceremonies followed, involving several forms of incense. The words stress purification and restoration. What is in the 2 eyes of Horus has been brought in the 2 vases of Thoth. It purifies the king and removes the power of destruction from him. The semen incense opens his mouth and gives him its taste in the divine dwelling. The semen incense is called an emission of Horus. It steadies the heart of Horus, Set, and purifies the gods who follow Horus. The king is censed with natron, established among the gods his brethren, and given a mouth like that of a newborn sucking calf. His head, mouth, and bones are purified, decays not to touch him, and the eye of Horus fills his face. Budge reminds us that Horus gave his eye to Osiris and thereby restored him to life. Repetitions in the original are omitted by Budge, but the rhythm of repeated purity is very much the point. You are pure. Your purifications are the purifications of Horus, and the purifications of Horus are yours. Your mouth is like that of a calf on the day of its birth. I have given you the eye of Horus, and your face is filled with it. The 9th ceremony represented the king's rebirth. A priest personified the dead king, wrapped himself in the skin of a bull, lay on a small bed, and pretended to be dead. The chief priest called out, "O my father," 4 times. Then the priest, acting as the king, came out of the bull skin and sat up. That action symbolized resurrection in the form of a spirit body, the Sahu. The chief priest declared that the king was alive, would never be removed, and was like Horus in every way. The priest who personified the king then put on a special garment, took a staff or scepter, and spoke as the son of the dead king. He said that he loved his father and his transformation, that he had made his father and made a great statue of him, and that Horus loves those who love him. He pressed the lips of the statue and said that he had come to embrace him. "I am your son, I am Horus, I have pressed your mouth for you, I am your beloved son." When the chief priest says, in Budge's translation, that he has delivered his eye from his mouth and cut off his leg, Budge explains the meaning. The king has been delivered from the jaws of death, and a grievous wound has been dealt to the god of death, here identified with Set. While these ceremonies took place, sacrificial animals were killed. Budge names especially 2 bulls, a gazelle, and geese. Their slaughter represented the defeat and death of the dead king's enemies. The heart and a foreleg from each bull were presented to the statue. The priest addressed the king as Osiris, because the dead king was assumed to have taken on the nature of Osiris. The priest declared that he had come as Horus to embrace the king, had pressed his mouth, had opened it, and had set his mouth and teeth in their proper places. He opened the mouth with the eye of Horus. Then the priest took 2 metal instruments and made the ritual motion of opening the mouth and eyes of the statue. He said he had opened the mouth and the 2 eyes with the instrument of Ampu, that is, Anubis, the ancient god of embalming who appears as a man with the head of a dog or jackal. He also used the Meska instrument with which the mouths of the gods had been opened. Horus opens the mouth and eyes of the Osiris, just as he opened the mouth of his father Osiris. With the iron that comes from Set, and with the Meska instrument of iron, the mouth of the Osiris is opened. The result is life in action. The Osiris, meaning the dead king, will walk and speak. His body will be with the great company of the gods in the great house of the Aged One, the sun god, who dwells in Anu. Budge notes that Anu is the On of the Bible and the Heliopolis of the Greeks, a few miles east of modern Cairo. The king will take possession of the Urk crown before Horus, lord of mankind. Horus has opened the mouth and eyes with the instruments Seber and used for the mouths of the gods of the south. All the gods bring words of power and recite them for him. Through those words they make him live. He receives double strength, receives the fluid of life, is protected, will not die, and can change form among the doubles of the gods. He rises as king of the south and king of the north. Shu, the air god and son of Keb, equips him, raises him to the height of heaven, makes him a wonder, and endows him with strength. The ceremonies after this concern clothing and food. Banlets, a collar, and other items are presented to the statue. Each gift gives the king a special quality in the other world. The words spoken over these gifts are highly symbolic and are believed to be powerful in themselves. They bring the king's double, the Ka, back to earth to live in the statue, and every repetition renews the king's life beyond the grave. The second great work Budge presents is the liturgy of funerary offerings. Its oldest form, preserved in the pyramid texts, proves for him that sacrifice and offering were essential to Egyptian religion from the earliest dynasties. The opening rites purified the deceased by sprinkling water mixed with salt, natron, and other cleansing substances, and by burning incense. Then came about 1. 150 offerings, foods of all kinds, fruit, flowers, vegetables, several kinds of wine, 7 precious ointments, royal clothing, and other necessities. As each item was presented to the king's spirit, which was believed to be present in his statue in the Tuat chamber of the tomb, the priest spoke a formula. That formula changed the object's substance into something usable by the king's spirit. Used or absorbed by him, it renewed his life and maintained his existence in the other world. Every offering was called the Eye of Horus because it possessed life-giving power. Budge then gives examples from the liturgy. In offering 32, cold water of the north is poured out as a libation for Osiris and for Uranus, the king identified with Osiris. The libation comes before the king's son, before Horus. The priest says he has brought the Eye of Horus so that the king's heart may be refreshed. He has set it under the king's sandals and presents what flowed forth from him. There will be no stoppage in the king's heart while it is with him, and the offerings that appear at command will appear at the king's word. Budge explains that the deceased, if he possessed the right words of power, could utter the names of the offerings he required and they would appear. In offering 37, the king takes possession of the 2 eyes of Horus, one white and one black. When they are in his face they light it up. The actual objects offered are 2 jugs of wine, one white and one black. In offering 38, day makes an offering to the king in the sky, the south and north give offerings, night gives an offering, and again south and north give offerings. The king is told that an offering is brought to him, he should look at it and hear it. There is an offering before him, behind him, and with him. Here the priest offers a cake for the journey. In offering 41, the white teeth of Horus are presented to Osiris Uranus so that they may fill his mouth. The object is 5 bunches of onions. In offering 47, the priest addresses Ra and says that every worship paid to Ra will also be paid to Uranus. Everything offered to Ra's body will be offered to the double of Uranus, and everything offered to Uranus's body will belong to Ra. Here the table of holy offerings is presented. In offering 61, the oils on the forehead of Horus are called upon to place themselves on Uranus's forehead and make him smell sweet. Cedar oil of the finest quality is offered. In offering 62, the oils are asked to make Uranus into a spirit. Soul, Ku, to give him mastery over his body, to open his eyes, and to let all spirit souls see him and hear his name. The finest the Henu oil is then offered as the Eye of Horus, seized and brought before him. Third group Budge quotes consists of hymns. The first is addressed to Nut, the sky goddess, on behalf of the dead King Pepi, who is called the Osiris Pepi. The hymn asks Nut to stretch herself over her son, snatch him from the hand of Set, and join him to herself. She is asked to come, seize her son, and form this great one like herself. Twice she is told to cast herself upon him. Twice she is called the great fashioner, and asked to form him, because this great one is among her children. The hymn then turns to Nut's own divine being. Keb, the earth god, was joined to her. She became a spirit. She was already a mighty goddess in the womb of her mother Tefnut before she had been born. She is asked to form Pepi with life and well-being so that he will not die. Her heart was strong. She leapt in her mother's womb under the name Nut. She is the perfect daughter, mighty in her mother, crowned like a king of the north. She is asked to make Pepi a spirit, soul within her, and not let him die. Nut is also called the great lady who came into being in the sky, mighty, making happiness, and filling every place or every being with her beauty. The whole earth is beneath her, and she has taken possession of it. She has encompassed the earth, and everything is in her 2 hands. The prayer asks her to let Pepi be in her like an imperishable star. She is associated with Keb under the name Pet, meaning sky, and has united the earth everywhere. As mistress over the earth, she is above her father Shu and has mastery over him, who loves her so much that he places himself beneath her in everything. He has taken possession of every god, perhaps with his boat, and made them shine like lamps. They will not cease from her, just as the stars do not cease. The hymn ends by asking that Pepi not depart from her and her name hurt. Great lady who came into being in the sky, the whole earth is under you, and everything is in your 2 hands. Grant that Pepi may be in you like an imperishable star. The second hymn is to the sun god. It greets Tem and Kepra, the god who created himself. Tem is the high one in the name Height. Kepra came into being in the name Kepra. The hymn then greets the Eye of Horus, which Horus has completely furnished with his hands. Budge notes that here the Eye of Horus is a name for Egypt. The eye is not permitted to be obedient to those in the west, east, south, north, or earth. It is obedient only to Horus. Horus furnished the eye, built it, and made it habitable. It does whatever Horus commands wherever he goes. It lifts up to him the waterfowl within it and the waterfowl that will be within it. Every tree in it and every tree that will be in it. Cakes and ale, present and future. Gifts, present and future. Everything in it and everything that will be in it. It takes all these to Horus wherever he wishes to be. The hymn then pictures the doors of Egypt standing fast shut like the god Amutef, whom Budge identifies as the god called the pillar of his mother. Those doors do not open to the west, east, north, south, or the middle of the earth. They open to Horus. Horus made them stand firm, and delivered them from every evil attack Set made against them. Horus made Egypt a settled country in the name Kirkut. He passed bowing after it in the name Nut, and he delivered it from every evil attack of Set. The fourth group of passages describes the king's power and happiness in heaven. One passage says the sky has taken the life of the star Septet South Eyes, the dog star, and now Uranus is a living being, the son of Septet. The 18 gods have purified him in Mesca, the great bear, and he is an imperishable star. His house will not perish in the sky, and his throne will not perish on earth. Men make supplication there, and the gods fly there. Septet makes Unas fly to heaven to join his brothers, the gods. Not the great lady and sky goddess unfolds her arms to Unas. She turns them into 2 divine souls at the head of the souls of Anu, under the head of Ra. He made them 2 mourning women when he was on his bier. Unez's throne is beside Ra, and he will not give it to anyone else. Unas comes forth into heaven by Ra. His face is like the faces of hawks, his wings are like those of geese, his nails are like the claws of the god Thoth. No evil word is spoken about Unas on earth among men, and there is no hostile speech about him among the gods. Unas has destroyed his word and ascended to heaven. Upuwatu makes him fly up among his brother gods. Unas draws his arms together like the Smendus, strikes his wings like a falcon, and flies upward. The passage cries out to men. Unas flies to heaven. Another heavenly passage summons the gods of the west, east, south, and north, 4 groups who embrace the holy lands, to devote themselves to Osiris when he appears in heaven. Osiris will sail into the sky with his son Horus by his fingers. He will announce him and make him rise like the great god in the sky. The gods will cry out, "Behold Horus, son of Osiris, behold Unas, firstborn son of Hathor, behold the seed of Keb." Osiris commands that Unas rise as a second Horus. 4 spirit souls in Anu write an edict to the 2 great gods in the sky. The same passage gives us the heavenly ladder. Ra sets up the ladder in front of Osiris, and Horus sets up the ladder in front of his father Osiris when he goes to his spirit, 1 ladder on one side and 1 on the other, with Unas between them. Budge notes that this is the ladder by which souls ascended to heaven, and that a picture of it appears in the papyrus of Ani. Unas is the god of the pure seats coming forth from the bath. When Unas stands, there is Horus; when he sits, there is Set. Ra grasps his hand, spirit to heaven, body to earth. Budge now turns to what he calls a very remarkable passage in the text of Unas, repeated in the text of Teta. It describes the king in heaven as a mighty hunter. He chases, lassos, kills, and eats gods in order to absorb their strength, wisdom, divine attributes, and everlasting life. I will say this plainly but not sensationally. The passage is fierce royal theology. It is not dinner chatter. It imagines kingship as the power to take divine power into oneself. The passage opens with cosmic terror. The skies lower. The star gods tremble. The archers and the Akaru gods, which Budge identifies as groups of stars, quake in their bones. Those with them fall silent when they see Unas rising as a soul, in the form of the god who lives on his fathers and turns his mothers into food. Unas is Lord of Wisdom, and even his mother does not know his name. His adoration is in heaven. He has become mighty in the horizon like Temu, the father who gave him birth, and after Temu gave birth to him, Unas became stronger than his father. Unas is surrounded by powers. His doubles, his vital strengths, are behind him. The soles of his feet are beneath his feet. His gods are over him. Serpents sit upon his brow. Serpent guides go before him. The spirit of flame looks upon his soul. The powers of Unas protect him. He is a bull in heaven and directs his steps wherever he wishes. He lives upon the form each god takes upon himself, and he eats the flesh of those who come to fill their bellies with magical charms in the lake of fire. He is equipped with power against their spirit souls and rises as the mighty one, lord of those who dwell in power. Unas takes his seat with his back turned toward Keb, the earth god. He has weighed his words, meaning, as Budge explains, that he has entered into judgment with the hidden nameless god on the day of hacking in pieces the firstborn. He is Lord of offerings, the untir of the Na, and he himself makes meat and drink offerings abundant. Then the language becomes still more forceful. Unas devours men and lives upon the gods. He is Lord of envoys whom he sends on missions. The passage names the king's terrible assistants. One called he who cuts off hairy scalps, dwelling in the fields, ties the gods with ropes. Tesertep shepherds them for Unas and drives them to him. The cord master binds them for slaughter. Hensu, slayer of the wicked, cuts their throats and draws out their inner parts, because Unas sends him to slaughter them. Jesmu, whom Budge identifies as the executioner of Osiris, cuts them in pieces and boils their limbs in blazing night cauldrons. Unas eats their magical powers and swallows their spirit souls. The great gods among them are his meal at daybreak, the lesser ones at evening, and the smallest at night. The old gods and goddesses become fuel for his furnace. The mighty ones in heaven light the fire under the cauldrons where the thighs of the firstborn are heaped, and the one who makes those in heaven go about for Unas lights the fire under the cauldrons with the thighs of their women. He goes through both heavens and around the 2 banks of the celestial Nile. The purpose of all this force is supremacy. Unas is the great power, the power of powers, and chief of the gods' invisible forms. Whatever he finds on his path he eats immediately. His magical might stands before that of all the spirit bodies in the horizon. He is the firstborn of the firstborn gods. Thousands surround him, and hundreds make offerings to him. Sa, Orion, the father of the gods, makes him manifest as the great power. Unas repeats his rising in heaven and is crowned lord of the horizon. Unas has reckoned up the bandlets and arm rings of his captives. He has taken possession of the hearts of the gods. He has eaten the red crown and swallowed the white crown. His food is inner parts, his meat is hearts and their words of power. He eats what the red crown sends forth, he increases, and the god's words of power are in his belly. His attributes are not taken from him. He has eaten the whole knowledge of every god. His lifetime is eternity, and the length of his existence is everlastingness. He takes the form of one who does what he wishes and does not do what he hates, and he remains on the horizon forever and ever and ever. Unas has eaten the whole knowledge of every god. His lifetime is eternity, and the length of his existence is everlastingness. The passage closes by saying that the soul of the gods is in Unas, their spirit, souls are with him, and the offerings made to him are more numerous than those made to the gods. The fire of Unas is in their bones, because their soul is in Unas, and their shades remain with those who belong to them. Budge's text becomes uncertain at one point, referring to two hidden Ka gods, but the conclusion is clear enough: the seat of Unas's heart is among those who live upon this earth forever and ever and ever. Budge ends the chapter with an extract from one of the later pyramid texts, now concerning Pepi. Pepi was brought forth by the god Nu when there was no heaven, no earth, nothing established, no fighting, and no fear of the eye of Horus. Pepi belongs to the great offspring brought forth in Anu Heliopolis. They have never been conquered by a king or ruled by chiefs. They are irresistible, and their words cannot be contradicted. Therefore Pepi himself is irresistible. No king can conquer him, no chiefs can rule him, his enemies cannot triumph. He lacks nothing. His nails do not grow long for want of prey. No debt is reckoned against him. If he falls into the water, Osiris will lift him out. The two companies of the gods will carry him on their shoulders, and Ra, wherever he may be, will give him his hand. If Pepi falls upon the earth, Keb the earth, God will lift him up. The two companies of the gods will carry him on their shoulders, and Ra will again give him his hand. Pepi appears in heaven among the imperishable stars. His sister, the star South Eyes, the dog star, and his guide, the morning star, Venus, lead him by the hand to the field of offerings. He sits on a crystal throne with faces of fierce lions and feet shaped like the hoofs of the bull Sma-ur. He stands in his place between the two great gods with scepter and staff in his hands. He raises his hand to the Henmut spirits, and the gods come bowing to him. The two great gods look on from their places and find Pepi acting as judge of the gods. The word of every spirit, soul is in him, and offerings are made to him among the two companies of the gods.
What strikes me in this chapter is the range. The pyramid texts are at once ritual handbook, royal theology, poetry, offering list, protective technology, and cosmic drama. They can be tender, as when Nut gathers Pepi into the sky like an imperishable star. They can be formal, as when oil, wine, onions, linen, and water become the eye of Horus. They can also be startlingly severe, as when Unas takes the powers of the gods into himself. Budge's great point is that these inscriptions are old beyond easy explanation, and yet their central concern is plain enough. The dead king must live, speak, eat, rise, rule, and never die again. Good evening, and welcome back to Footnotes and Folly. Tonight Budge brings us to one of the most charming and unsettling little treasures of Egyptian literature, the Westgar Papyrus, now in Berlin, numbered p. 3033. It once belonged to Miss Westgar of Whitchurch, who gave it in 1839 to the great German Egyptologist Richard Lepsius, and Budge tells us it was probably written sometime between the 12th and 18th dynasties. Professor Ehrman first edited and translated it. What it preserves is a set of court tales about magicians who, according to the stories, lived under the ancient empire. We shall have wax crocodiles, parted water, severed heads restored to life, divine births, dangerous court politics, and the sun god Ra quietly rearranging the future of Egypt. A quiet evening in, then.
The first tale is said to have been told to King Khufu, the Cheops of the Greeks, by Prince Khafra. It belongs to the reign of King Nebka of the 3rd dynasty, and its magician is Ubanur. Budge notes that the name means splitter of stones, which is exactly the sort of name one wants in a professional magician, or possibly in a difficult colleague. Ubanur was the chief Kerheb in the Temple of Ptah at Memphis, a learned ritual expert, and a married man. Ubanur's wife, however, loved a young man who worked in the fields. She sent him a box of very fine clothes by one of her maids, and the young man soon suggested that they should meet and talk in a booth or little lodge in her garden. He told the steward to prepare the lodge, went there, sat with the young man, and drank beer with him until evening. The steward understood perfectly well what had happened, and in the morning he reported it to his master. Ubanur did not rage about the house. He asked for his casket, made of ebony and silver gold, the box that held his magical instruments and materials. From it he took wax and fashioned a little crocodile, 7 spans long. Then he recited words of power over it, commanding it to seize the young man when he came to bathe in the magician's lake. He handed the wax figure to the steward and told him to throw it into the water after the young man. The wife again ordered the lodge made ready, and again the young peasant came to her there. When he left, he went down to the lake to bathe as he usually did. The steward followed him and threw in the wax crocodile. At once the small figure became a living crocodile 7 cubits long, about 11 feet, seized the young man, and swallowed him. Meanwhile Ubanur was away in attendance on King Nebka, and he remained with him for 7 days. During all that time the young man was in the lake without air to breathe. At the end of the 7 days, Nebka suggested a walk. Ubanur asked whether the king would like to see a marvel involving the young peasant, and the king agreed. They came to the lake, Yubanur spoke a spell and ordered the crocodile to come up, bringing the young man with it. Crocodile obeyed. The king saw the creature and was alarmed by its hideousness, but Yubanur stooped calmly, picked it up in his hand, and at once the living crocodile was gone. Only the wax crocodile remained. Get thee gone, and take what is thine with thee. Yubanur told the king what the young man had done with his wife in the garden lodge, talking and drinking beer there over a number of days. Nebka then spoke to the wax crocodile, and it leapt from the magician's hand into the lake. It became a living crocodile once more and swam away with the young man. No one ever knew what became of either of them. The king then had Yubanur's wife seized, taken to the ground on the north side of the palace, burned, and her ashes scattered in the river. When Khufu heard this story from Prince Khafra, he ordered offerings to be made in the tomb of Nebka, his predecessor, and gifts to be presented to the magician Yubanur. The second tale is offered by Prince Bayafra, who stands up before Khufu and says he will tell a story from the reign of Senefru, Khufu's father. The magician this time is Sechamank, a great Kerheb and scribe. One day Senefru was gloomy and perplexed. He wandered through the rooms and courts of the palace looking for something to amuse him, and nothing worked. At last he summoned Sechamank. When the magician arrived, Senefru addressed him as my brother and explained his problem. Sechamank suggested a royal outing on the lake. Have a boat prepared, he said, and decorated with beautiful things. The movements of the rowers, the sight of the deep water, and the fields and gardens around the lake would delight the king. Then the magician became quite specific. He asked for 20 ebony paddles inlaid with gold and silver, 20 pretty maidens with flowing hair, and 20 network garments for them to wear. Senefru ordered it all done. The boat was made ready, the maidens took their places, and the king sat in his little pavilion while they rowed him about the lake. Sechamank had judged him correctly. The king was entertained, especially by watching the rowers at work. Then the handle of one maiden's paddle caught in her long hair, and as she tried to free it, a malachite ornament fell from her hair into the water and vanished. The maiden was distressed and stopped rowing. Since the other rowers on her bench had to keep time with her, they stopped as well, and the whole rhythm of the boat was broken. Senefru asked why the rowing had ceased. When one of the maidens explained the loss, the king promised that the ornament would be recovered. Budge says the maiden's reply seems to mean that she had no doubt she would get it back. Senefru called Sechamank. The magician recited spells, and the water of the lake divided into two parts. Then the water on one side rose up, and placed itself upon the water on the other side. The boat, Budge supposes, sank gently down to the bed of the lake. There lay the malachite ornament. Sechamank fetched it and gave it back to its owner. Budge keeps the measurements, and so shall I. Where the ornament fell, the lake was 12 cubits deep, between 18 and 19 feet. When one half of the water was piled upon the other, the combined depth was 24 cubits. After the ornament was restored, Sechamank recited further spells. The water lowered itself, spread back across the lake bed, and returned to its ordinary level. Senefru gathered his nobles, discussed the marvel with them, and gave the magician a handsome gift. When Khufu heard Bayafra's story, he ordered funerary offerings to Senefru's tomb, and bread, beer, meat, and incense to the tomb of Sechamank. Now Prince Heritata speaks. He is Khufu's son, a very wise man, and Budge notes that Egyptian tradition connected him with the discovery of certain chapters of the Book of the Dead. Heritata tells his father that so far he has heard only stories about dead magicians, stories whose truth can no longer be tested. He proposes something better. Khufu should see a sage who is alive in his own day, a man the king does not yet know. Khufu asks who this man is. Heritata names Teta, a peasant living in Tet Senefru. Teta is 110 years old and, according to the tale, still eats 500 bread, cakes, a leg of beef, and 100 pots of beer each day. I pause only to observe that ancient Egyptian wonder literature understood breakfast with real ambition. More importantly, Teta knows how to reunite a severed head to its body, how to make a lion follow him while its rope trails on the ground, and how to find out the numbers of the 8-bit chambers of the Shrine of Thoth. Budge cannot be certain what these 8-bit chambers were. He suggests they were probably books and instruments used by magicians for astrological calculations or for magical work. Khufu had long wanted their number because he wished to make something like them for his own horizon, that is, for his royal monument or sacred project. He orders Heritata himself to go and bring Teta. A boat is prepared for the prince, and Heritata travels to Tet Senefru. When he reaches the river bank nearest Teta's village, the boat is tied up. The prince continues overland seated in an ebony chair, a kind of sedan, carried on poles of costly sesencum wood decorated with gold. At the village the chair is set down, and Heritata gets out to greet the old man. Teta is lying on a bed, with the door of his house lying on the ground. One servant stands by the bed holding the sage's head and fanning him, another rubs his feet. Heritata gives him a formal, poetic greeting. The old man, he says in effect, seems able to defy the usual effects of age, as though he had found the secret of youth. Then the prince explains that he has come with a summons from Khufu. Teta is invited to eat the king's food and enjoy the king's gifts, and after a happy life the king will conduct him to his fathers who rest in the grave. Teta answers with equal ceremony. He welcomes Prince Heritata, praises him as one who loves his father, and says Khufu will reward and promote him. He blesses the prince's Ka, the vital double or life force, and speaks of his soul knowing the roads of the other world and reaching the door of those who are perilled there. Heritata then holds out his hands, helps the old man rise, and walks with him to the river, Teta leaning on his arm. At the river, Teta asks for a boat for his children and his books. Herotatef gives him 2 boats with full crews, while Teta himself travels in the prince's own boat. When they arrive at the palace, Herotatef goes in to announce him. Khufu orders that Teta be brought quickly, then goes out into the great hall, and the sage is led before him. Khufu asks Teta why he has never seen him before. Teta replies with admirable courtly nerve that only the man who is summoned to the presence comes. As soon as the king summoned him, he came. Khufu asks whether it is true that Teta can rejoin a severed head to its body. Teta says that he can. Let them not bring a man, O king my lord. Perhaps it may be ordered that the head shall be cut off some other living creature. Khufu proposes to bring a prisoner from the prison so that his death sentence may be carried out. Teta refuses to perform the test on a human being. A goose is brought instead. Teta cuts off its head, lays the body on the west side of the hall and the head on the east side, and recites spells. The body of the goose rises and waddles toward the head, while the head moves toward the body. When they meet, the head leaps back onto the body, and the goose stands up and cackles. A second kind of goose, called a keta, is brought, and Teta does the same thing. Then an ox is brought. Teta cuts off its head, speaks the spells over head and body, and the ox rises whole again on its feet. Finally a lion is brought. Teta recites spells over it, and the lion follows behind him like a dog, with the rope by which it had been tied trailing along the ground. Khufu now asks the question that brought Teta to court. Does he know the number of the 8 chambers of the shrine of Thoth? Teta says no, he does not know the number, but he does know where it can be found. There is a flint box, he says, in a house called Sapti at Heliopolis. Khufu asks who will bring him the box. Teta answers that he himself will not. The person who will bring it is the eldest of the 3 children of LibriTTS-R. Khufu asks who LibriTTS-R is. Teta says she is the wife of a priest of Ra of Sekhabu, a town in the second nome or county of Lower Egypt, a region the Greeks called Letopolites. LibriTTS-R is about to give birth to 3 children of Ra. The god has told her that these children will rise to the highest dignities in Egypt, and that the eldest will become high priest of Heliopolis. Budge gives that office its Egyptian title or Mao. At this Khufu's heart becomes sad. Teta asks why he is sad, and whether it is because of the 3 children. Then he reassures him in a compact prophecy, first Khufu's own son, then that son's son, and only then one of the 3 children. In other words, the royal future is changing, but not quite this afternoon. Khufu asks when the children will be born. Teta says LibriTTS-R will give birth on the 15th day of the first month of Pert, the season Budge identifies as running from November 15 to March 15. Khufu then makes a remark whose exact meaning, Budge says, is hard to follow. One thing is clear. The king intends to visit the temple of Ra of Sekhabu, apparently set on or near the great canal of the Letopolite nome. Teta replies that he will make sure the water in the canal is 4 cubits deep, about 6 feet deep enough for the royal barge to sail there without difficulty. Khufu then returns to the palace and orders that Teta be lodged in Prince Herotatef's house, live with him, and receive 1,000 bread, cakes, 100 pots of beer, 1 ox, and 100 bundles of vegetables. All the king commands for Teta is done. The last section of the Westcar papyrus tells how the 3 sons of Ra were born. When the time drew near, Ra ordered 4 goddesses and 1 god to attend LibriTTS-R. They were Isis, Nethys, Meskenet, a goddess of childbirth, Heket, an ancient frog goddess connected with generation and birth, and Khnemu, the god who helped at creation and fashion the bodies of men and women. Budge also reminds us that Isis and Nethys were daughters of Keb and Nut and sisters of Osiris and Set. Isis was the mother of Horus, and Nethys the mother of Anubis. Ra sends them because, when these 3 children grow up and exercise rule throughout Egypt, they will build temples for the gods and fill the altars with abundant offerings of meat and drink. The 4 goddesses change themselves into dancing women and go to the house where LibriTTS-R lies ill. Outside they find her husband, Rosser, the priest of Ra. They clash their cymbals, rattle their sistra, and try to cheer him. Rosser objects because his wife is ill inside the house. The disguised goddesses answer that they should be allowed to see her because they know how to help. Rosser tells them, and Khnemu with them, to enter. Isis, Nethys, and Heket assist at the birth of the 3 boys. Meskenet prophesies sovereignty over the land for each child, and Khnemu gives health to their bodies. After the births, the goddesses and Khnemu go outside and tell Rosser to rejoice, because LibriTTS-R has given him 3 children. Rosser asks what he can do for them in return. Having nothing grand to offer, he asks them to take barley from his granary as a gift for their own granaries. They agree, and Khnemu brings the barley. The goddesses then set out for the place from which they had come. On the way, Isis asks her companions why they went to LibriTTS-R at Ra's command, and yet worked no wonder for the children, no sign that could be announced to their father, who had let them leave without asking for a boon. So they make divine crowns of the kind that belong to the Lord, meaning the king, with life, strength, and health attached to them, and they hide the crowns in the barley. Then they send rain and storm through the heavens, return to Rosser's house carrying the barley, and ask that it be kept in a sealed room until they have danced their way back north. The barley is put away under seal. 14 days later, after LibriTTS-R has kept herself secluded, she asks one of her handmaidens whether the house is fully ready. The maid says that everything is ready except jars of barley drink which have not been brought. LibriTTS-R asks why. The maid explains that there is no barley in the house, except the barley belonging to the dancing women, and that it is sealed in its chamber. LibriTTS-R tells her to fetch some of it anyway, certain that when Rosser returns he will make good what she has taken. The handmaiden breaks open the chamber. Inside she hears loud cries and shouts, music, singing, dancing, and all the noises people make in honor of a king's birth. The handmaiden reports this to LibriTTS-R. LibriTTS-R searches the room herself and cannot find where the sound is coming from. Then she lays her temple against a box and hears the noises inside it. She takes that box and places it inside another box, and that second box inside a third. She seals the whole thing, wraps it in leather, puts it in a chamber containing her jar of barley beer or barley wine, and seals the door. When Rosser comes back from the fields, she tells him everything. His heart is very glad, and the husband and wife sit down to enjoy themselves. A few days later, LibriTTS-R quarrels with the handmaiden and slaps her soundly. The maid is furious. In front of the household she threatens her mistress, saying in effect, "Do you dare treat me like this when I can destroy you?" She knows LibriTTS-R has given birth to 3 kings, and she declares that she will go and tell King Khufu. The handmaiden's intention is dangerous. She thinks that if Khufu learns what Rosser and LibriTTS-R believe about their sons, and hears the prophecies of the goddesses, he may kill the children and perhaps their parents as well. She goes to her maternal uncle, who is weaving flax on the walk, and tells him what she plans to do. He receives neither support nor sympathy. Her uncle gathers strands of flax into a thick rope and gives her a beating with it. A little later, the handmaiden goes to the river or canal to fetch water. While she is filling her pot, a crocodile seizes her and carries her away. Budge adds, presumably eats her. Her uncle then goes to LibriTTS-R's house to tell her what has happened. He finds LibriTTS-R sitting with her head bowed over her breast, deeply sad and miserable. The uncle asks why she is so sad. LibriTTS-R says the cause is the handmaiden, who was born in the house, grew up in it, and has just left threatening to tell the king about the birth of the 3 kings. The uncle nods in consolation and tells her the whole story. The maid came to him with the same threat. He beat her with a rope of flax. She went to fetch water, and a crocodile carried her off. Budge closes the chapter by drawing out the historical value of these tales. He says there is reason to think the 3 sons of LibriTTS-R became 3 kings of the 5th dynasty known as Khafra, Menkaura, and Userkaf. The stories matter because they contain elements of history. The immediate successors of the 4th dynasty, whose chief kings included Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaura, the builders of the 3 great pyramids at Giza, delighted in calling themselves sons of Ra. Those later kings also did everything they could to spread the worship of the sun god as practiced at Anu, or Heliopolis, throughout Egypt. Budge thinks it probable that Yubanur, Sachamank, and Teta were historical people. Their reputation for skill in magic seized the Egyptian imagination under many dynasties, and their names were venerated far into posterity.
And their chapter 3 leaves us, not with magic as a parlor trick, but with magic as a serious literary way of thinking about justice, kingship, sacred knowledge, and the hidden movement of history. The stories are courtly, pious, sometimes severe, and often wonderfully practical. An ornament is lost, so the lake is folded in half. A king wants entertainment, so theology produces choreography. A dangerous succession is announced, so the gods smuggle crowns in barley. I rather admire a civilization in which even the grain storage has a dynastic policy. Budge's larger point is sober enough. Beneath the marvels lie memories of real priestly learning, real political change, and the rise of Ra's cult at Heliopolis. The crocodiles and cackling geese may be the glittering surface, but the current underneath is history. And there we pause, at the end of part 1. We have met the god of writing, walked inside the oldest tombs on earth and their star-bound liturgies, and watched the court magicians work their wonders. Next time the journey continues into the Book of the Dead itself, and the great weighing of the human heart. Until then, thank you for reading the old books with me. Good night.